So, we are studying the Bhagavad Gita, and so far we're on the second chapter, and up till now we have, especially from chapter verses 11 to 30, we heard about the difference between the body and the soul, analytical discussion, and how the soul, who we really are, is eternal, how the body is always changing, and how nothing can harm the soul. None of Arjuna's weapons can hurt the soul. And nothing can stop the body from changing and ultimately disappearing. So now, as I mentioned last week, in preparation for this week, we're gonna, it's like, what? Why is Krishna doing this? In 31 to 37 or 38, we're going to hear the preaching is coming down. He's still trying to encourage Arjuna to fight. But now, if you think you're your body, if you think you're a Kshatriya, you're in the bodily concept, then you should still fight. So these verses are, that's why it's, it can be a little confusing. Why doesn't Krishna just go straight for surrender to me and get it over with? But, we all know what it's like when you're trying to introduce someone to Krishna consciousness. You don't just come up with the hair cutters and you get the men and shave their heads after visiting the temple for the first time, or ask them to donate their entire life savings to ISKCON, or, it's a gradual process. So Krishna is developing this argument in different ways, and he has his reasons for doing that. Okay, so don't be surprised when he does that here. And he's talking about things that are more in the Varnashram or even the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. So now he says, so considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, this is verse 31, Swadharman api chavekshyam na vikam pitum arhasi dharmyad di yudhach chayon yat kshatriyasya navidyate. So this word there, the word Kshatriya is right there. And he's talking about his swadharma, his material swadharma, his religious principles. Dharma is mentioned twice in this verse. And the translation is, considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles. And so there is no need to hesitate. And so in the previous section, Krishna was talking about Gyan, the difference between the body and soul. Now, less elevated principles, the promise of material reward. Ultimately, we'll see that in a few verses from now. So in verse 32, Yadrichchaya chopapanam swarga dwaram apavritam Sukhina Kshatriya Partha Labhante Yudham Idrisham. Okay, so O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors to the heavenly planets. So the word Swarga, you see there, Swarga of the heavenly planets. Dwara means door. And Apavritam, it opens wide. And you'll become Sukhina, you'll become happy. You'll be a happy Kshatriya. And Prabhupada writes that in the second paragraph, the Kshatriya's duty is to protect the citizens from all kinds of difficulties. And for that reason, he has to apply violence in suitable cases for law and order. Therefore, he has to conquer the soldiers of inimical kings, and thus, with religious principles, he should rule over the world. That's from the Parashara Smriti. So Prabhupada then writes, considering all aspects, Arjuna had no reason to refrain from fighting. If he should, if he should conquer his enemies, he would enjoy the kingdom. And if he dies on the battle, he'll be elevated to the heavenly planet. So you see, Arjuna's argument was that if he conquers his enemies, sorry, I just had some prasadam just now. If you remember, Arjuna's argument says, I won't enjoy, because if I win, all the people that I would enjoy with will be dead. And here Krishna says, no, you'll enjoy the kingdom. And if you die, then he was saying, well, I'll be dead. And then Krishna, no, you're going to heaven. Now we do, I think everyone here understands that when we say heavenly planets, that's different than the spiritual world. It's still very much in the material world. So Prabhupada concludes, fighting would be for his benefit in either case. So these heavenly planets, they are the goal of those following the karma kanda process. We're going to hear more about that later in the verses 42 and more. So Krishna tells also Arjuna, don't worry about your relatives' welfare also. If they die on the battle, they go to heaven. And the same thing holds true for him. But if he doesn't fight, then he loses everything. And that's what we're going to hear in the next verse, in the next few verses. So in 33, atachetvam imam dharmyam sangramam na karishyasi tata swadharmam kirtim cha hitva papam abapshasi. If, however, you do not perform this religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sin for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. Prabhupada writes, but if he abandoned the battle, not only would he neglect his specific duty as a Kshatriya, but he would lose all his fame and good name and thus prepare his royal road to hell. So this verse specifically defeats Arjuna's argument where he said in chapter 1 that he's going to get sins by fighting. And here Krishna says quite the opposite. If you don't do your duty, then you'll get sins. And this is the general understanding, or one understanding of sin, is not doing one's duty. Okay? So we go into something else here. So are there any questions or comments so far? It's all good. Okay. So then we carry on with this point about reputation. People, akirtim. So kirti means fame or reputation. Akirtim means the opposite, right? Chapi bhutani. Oh, one thing about the Sanskrit. No, that's okay. Akirtim chapim bhutani kata yishyanti tev yayam sambhavitasya chakirtir maranad atirichete. People will always speak of your infamy, and for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death. So just give me 1 second. Someone's knocking at the door here. 1 second. People will always speak of your infamy, and for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death. So, I remember when I first read this years and years and years ago, I said, I didn't understand how Krishna was coming down a few notches and speaking from the, if you think you're your body platform, because otherwise I think, wait a second, Lord Chaitanya says, Trinada Pisunichena, Tarora Pisishna, we're supposed to be humbler than the blade of grass, so we don't care about our fame and infamy. So this should give us a really good hint that he's not talking on that level of bhakti. He's thinking, if you think you're a Kshatriya, because Kshatriyas are big on honor, right? And prowess. So both as Prabhupada writes, so both as friend and philosopher to Arjuna, Lord Krishna now gives his final judgment regarding Arjuna's refusal to fight. The Lord says, Arjuna, if you leave the battlefield before the battle even begins, people will call you a coward. And if you think that people may call you bad names, but that you will save your life by fleeing the battlefield, then my advice is that you better die in the battle. For a respectable man like you, ill fame is worse than death. So you should not flee for fear of your life, better to die in the battle. That will save you from ill fame of misusing my friendship and from losing your prestige in society. So, then in the next verse, Bhayad Ranad Uparatam Mams Yante Tvam Maharataha Yesham Cha Tvam Bahu Mato Bhutva Yasi Lag Havam. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battle out of fear only, and thus they will consider you insignificant. So Prabhupada writes that Lord Krishna continued to give his verdict to Arjuna. Do not think that the great generals like Duryodhana, Karna, and other contemporaries will think that you have left the battlefield out of compassion for your brothers and grandfathers. They will think you have left out of fear of your life, and thus their high estimation of your personality will go to hell. So they're not going to say, oh, look, Arjuna, he's so compassionate. And they would just joke and joke and joke. Wow, what a great soul. He's a total wimp. He's totally afraid of us. What a loser. And so for Kshatriyas who think that they're their body, loss of reputation and others' esteem for them will be more painful than the arrows that are shot at them. And it continues a little bit more here that in 36, the same point comes up. Avachya vadhams cha bahun vadishyante tava hitaha nidhantas tava sampartyam tato dukan taram nukim. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful than that? So Arjuna's compassion will be seen as cowardly weakness. And the result of his so-called compassion will just be infamy. So here, Krishna is defeating Arjuna's argument about compassion. And then Krishna gives his final verdict in the next verse, 37. Atova praps yasi swargam jitva ba uksyase mahim tasmad utishta kunteya yudhaya krita nishtaya. O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you'll be conquered and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up with determination and fight. So Arjuna had decided fighting is not going to bring enjoyment, it's only going to bring misery. And Krishna defeats that point. Arjuna thought winning the battle will cause the death of those with whom I have who I'll enjoy the kingdom with. Losing will mean my own death. And Krishna's words reverse Arjuna's plan for attaining happiness, right? If you are killed in the battle, you go to heaven. If you are victorious, you enjoy the earthly kingdom. So Krishna ends this section in the next verse that takes the discussion to, so before we go to there, let's see if you have any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, in this 32nd verse, sorry, you asked again, I'm asking back one.
32nd, okay.
Here Krishna is saying, if he should conquer his enemies, he would enjoy the kingdom. And if he should die in the battle, he would be elevated to the heavenly planets. But Arjuna was thinking that he cannot enjoy without his family, right? But Krishna is saying he would enjoy the kingdom.
Yeah, so, but the other thing, one thing that you're not mentioning is that Krishna's also told him that all those people that he kills will go to heaven. So that thing about, that kind of lamentation is lessened by that statement. And of course there will be some people, around. So but I mean, I see your point, but it's not that there won't be anyone, but that was at least, Krishna did not accept that argument of Arjuna's. His brothers would be there, his wives will be there, the citizens will be there. So it's not, it was a pretty weak argument in one sense. Because he didn't get along with a lot of those people he was about to kill anyway, right? It wasn't like he was best friends with Duryodhana, right? Or even his arch enemy was kind of Karna, right? That's my understanding. Other questions, comments?
Thank you.
Okay, well, then we will move on to the next section, although this last verse is kind of a bridge between the two. So that is, I was at 32, I have to go back up to 38. It's a beautiful verse, and it's something that we can apply to some extent in our bhakti practice. Sukha dukkhe samakritva labha labho jaya jayo tato yudhaya yudyasva naivam papam avapyasi. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting. And so if you're a CPA, do thou be a CPA for the sake of being a CPA, without considering happiness or distress. I don't like, it's hot today, it's cold today. Loss or gain, victory or defeat. And by doing so, you shall never incur sin. So Prabhupada writes that Lord Krishna now directly says that Arjuna should fight for the sake of fighting because he desires the battle. There is no consideration of happiness or distress, profit or loss, victory or defeat in the activities of Krishna consciousness. That everything should be performed for the sake of Krishna is transcendental consciousness. So there is no reaction to material activities. He who acts for his own sense gratification, either in goodness or in passion, is subject to the reaction, good or bad. So this is, we will hear later in the Bhagavad Gita more about actually doing things for bhakti, but this is a step in that direction that we're going to be hearing about in the subsequent verses in this chapter. it's a detached mindset that we do our duty regardless of the results, which we'll hear about later in another verse, and also the pain or pleasure that we derive, that we experience while we're doing it. And this, of course, when we apply this in Krishna consciousness, this means to our service. If we're doing some service to Krishna, we don't consider our happiness and distress, we consider Krishna's happiness. And we do it for his pleasure. And we don't think, loss or gain, victory or defeat. Those results are up to Krishna, but I do my best with love, with devotion. And that's all that, Krishna is looking for. So this is a verse to meditate on. And we, all of us do duties in life that aren't like the greatest fun in the world. We all have to brush our teeth and do things like that. And it's not like that gives transcendental bliss. But we do them in a detached mood. We do things that we have to do just because it's part of living in this world. And we don't get into the whole, I don't like, because that's all based on our own happiness and distress. But rather we either do them dutifully, or whenever possible, we do them dutifully for Krishna's pleasure. So,
Krishna Prabhuji, have a question here.
Yes.
So when Lord Krishna says that you shall never incur sin, and in the context of do thou fight for the sake of fighting, is this technically Nishkama Karma Yoga, or this is technically Nishkama Karma?
Yeah, I was trying to decide whether to get into that because it's a little complicated, not too much, but yes, Nishkam Karma Yoga or Buddhi Yoga, which is what we're going to be hearing about more in Prabhupada's purports. But the idea in Buddhi Yoga or Nishkam Karma, there's two levels of Nishkam Karma. One is to just do your duty, just like follow this verse, right? Just do your duty. Don't worry about happiness, stress, this, that. And it's true that you become, there's no sin, there's no reaction to that kind of work. But on a much higher level is to do our duty for Krishna's pleasure as a devotee. And that's obviously what we want to do. But the idea is to take the knowledge that we heard in 11 to 30, right, with the action that we heard from 31 to 37, and combine them. So don't act in ignorance of as Arjuna, as Krishna was addressing in 31 to 37, that you think you're your body, but you do want to fight, you do want to do your activity, your duty, but you do it in knowledge. So it's acting in knowledge. And this is an important theme because this is going to come up so many times in the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna keeps kind of asking, well, should I go off into the forest and not do any activity and then I won't incur sin? And every time Krishna said, no. Do your activities, but do them in the right consciousness. And this was, Lord Brahma said this, and Lord Chaitanya quoted Lord Brahma, Stane stita shrutikatam tanum vagmanobir, that stay in your position. You don't have to put on saffron and become a sannyasi. But shrutigatam, but hear about Krishna. So we can do our duties in this world, but we also have to find time to hear and chant about Krishna. And then we'll make rapid spiritual advancement. Okay, so yes, Nishkam happens on two levels. So since you brought it up, Karma Kanda is what we were kind of hearing about in the last 31 to 37. It's you follow the Veda. We're going to hear more about this in upcoming verses in a few minutes, actually. But you follow the Vedas for only material enjoyment. And then by coming in contact with the Upanishads and with devotees, then we can come up to Sakam Karma Yoga. That means we're doing our activities, but we have some material desires. And we're still attached to the fruit. The Nishkam person on both levels that I mentioned is not attached to the fruit. On the lower level, it's just not attached to the fruit. On the higher level, it's not attached to the fruit, but attached to Krishna's pleasure. Does that help, Mataji?
Actually, it would be, since we've brought the topic, unless you are planning to cover it in the future shlokas, can we talk about the, for example, is Sakama Karma Yoga, could that be considered mixed Mishra Bhakti? Or is that?
Technically, only if you have the objective as a Sakam Karma Yogi, if you know about Krishna. Because Mishra Bhakti has the word Bhakti in it.
Right.
So it means the person knows that Krishna is the goal. So the Sakam Karma Yogi, it depends if they know Krishna is the goal or not, just like with the Nishkam person, right? So I'll try to give you, I'll give you a little way of thinking of these, okay? So the Sakam Karma, let's say that they're devoted. Let's just put this all in ISKCON language, okay? So a Sakam Karma Yogi who knows about Krishna, he or she is attached to the fruit and the activity, okay? So it's better if somebody like that, it's better that they don't live in the ashram, in the temple, because if they're attached to fruits, they're gonna want to try to enjoy things and, or maybe make some money for themselves or have a fancier car than the others, you know, when they go out preaching, So it's better probably they live outside the temple and come to the temple whenever they can. Now, a Nishkam Karma Yogi is not attached to the fruit, but may still be attached to the activity. So in other words, they can live at the temple, they should, but I want to be a pujari, I don't want to be a book distributor, right? I'll do this service, but I won't do that service. So they're not attached to the fruit. They're living very simply. They're not absorbed in sense gratification, but they are attached to the activity they do for Krishna. And then the pure bhakta, the full-on devotee, is attached neither to the activity nor the fruit. So they go up to Krishna and they say, Krishna, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. My dear Guru Maharaj, my dear temple president, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. I'm not attached to the activity. I'm not attached to the fruit. I just want to serve. And if you want to skip ahead to chapter 9, verse 26, well, I could show it on my screen, I guess. I thought maybe I brought this up before, but maybe I didn't. Okay, let me share my screen in case you all don't have it readily available. So this verse 26 is a very famous verse, and it's a verse about bhakti. You see the word bhakti is mentioned twice. Patram pushpam palam toyam yo me bhaktya prayachati tadaham bhakti paritam asnami prayatatmana. If one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I will accept it. And notice Krishna uses a singular, a leaf, a flower, a fruit. You don't have to be rich. Pretty much everyone can at least find some water to offer to Krishna, okay? But if you offer it with devotion, then Krishna says, asnami, I accept it. So here, Krishna's saying, I want this, give it to me. And the devotee says, yes, okay? So that's bhakti. Now, it's a little subtle, but in the next verse, which is also a famous verse, Yat karosi, yat asnasi, yat johosi, dadasi, yat tapasisi kunteya, tat kurusa madarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, and whatever austerities you perform, you should do that O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. So it's technical, but this is one step down from the previous verse, because here you're already going to eat something, you're already going to do something, you're going to give some charity, you're going to perform some tapasya, you're already going to do it. And so, okay, I'll offer it to Krishna. Whereas, so you're attached to the work, not to the fruit. So it's more like Nishkam. And in this verse, Krishna says, this is what I want. And the devotee says, okay. I hope that's a little helpful in explaining that.
Yes, Prabhu. So just to clarify, when you mentioned earlier there are 2 levels to Nishkama Karma Yoga, were you indicating that the second level is actually Bhakti Yoga within Nishkama Karma Yoga, or what is the second level?
Now you're getting into technical terms, okay? Sometimes the acharyas will say it's not bhakti because it's not pure devotional service, and that's real bhakti. Other acharyas will say, I believe Baladev Vidyabhusan and Srila Prabhupada will say it is bhakti because it leads to bhakti. It's just like the example Srila Prabhupada gives of the ripe mango and the unripe mango, right? So the unripe mango, it's going to be ripe. So you're saying it's a ripe mango, it's just time separates it, right? So it is bhakti because it leads to bhakti. Now, if you really want more technicalities, since you're asking all these questions, which are great questions, by the way, there's 3 levels of devotion. There's the Uttama Bhakta. Remember we studied this?
Yes.
The Madhyama Bhakta and the Kanishta. And I mentioned this before, I think, but I'll mention it again. That the Kanishta can be very materialistic, but we call him a Bhakta, Kanishta Bhakti, because if we didn't, then devotees would not give them their association because they don't associate with non-devotees. So we call them a Bhakti so that Krishna will, so they're at the door of Bhakti. Okay. Other questions or comments?
So you are stating that, so 9.26 is addressing his devotees of pure devotees, and then 9.27 is possibly addressing the Nishkama.
It's Karma Yoga.
Okay.
But I have to add, Mataji, that it's a very beautiful verse, isn't it? Whatever you do, whatever you offer, whatever you ever give away, whatever you just do it to Krishna. So sometimes Prabhupada will talk about it in a non-technical way, basically saying it's bhakti. But there are places, I've found places where he says, actually, this is Karma Yoga. So
because Krishna
27, we very aspirational.
In 9.27, if we notice, Krishna is not using the word bhakti or bhakta there at all.
Right, but twice in 26.
Yes.
Yeah. And we'll get to that when we cover the 7th chapter. Well, 9th chapter. Any other questions, comments? Okay. So now we're switching gears a
I
little.
have one more question to bring this to a conclusion. So here in this shloka, meaning 2.38, where Krishna is saying, don't make any kind of profit loss calculation. So in just the earlier shloka, he said, if you were to make a profit loss calculation, this is the conclusion you would reach. Here he's saying, if you don't ever make a profit loss calculation, just do your duty. So to your earlier point, you were giving an example of a Nishkama Karma Yogi, for example. You were taking the example of, let's say, a devotee who wants to be a pujari, but is not
attached to the service, attached to the action, yes.
Right. But isn't that also some kind of calculation there? I mean, you may not be focused on the outcome, but your focus on the process is going to give you the satisfaction itself.
It's a calculation, and therefore it's not pure. Now, one thing we have to understand, when we say not attached to the fruit, it doesn't mean that, oh, I don't care, I'll just go hungry, or I'll live in a cardboard box. That's not the point. Or, I don't care about money, or anything like that. It just means that the devotee knows that it's ultimately, we do our best and we understand the result is up to Krishna. Instead of like really, oh, I got to do this, and that whole kind of mode of passion, everything depends upon me. The devotee does their best, but understands ultimately the results are up to Krishna.
Mhm. So does a Nishkama Karma Yogi give up all of their results, or is it just a detachment from the results?
Just detachment from the results. You can't, I mean, you know, if, like in practical terms, if you're living outside the temple, how can you give up all the fruits of your labor? You're going to starve, or you're going to be homeless, right?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. I was going to say something else, but okay, so we'll carry on. Oh, I got to go back to the second chapter, on the 9th chapter. All right, now we're switching gears a little bit. But a very important verse, Neha bikrama nasosti pratyavayo navidyate swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. And Prabhupada writes, activity in Krishna consciousness or acting for the benefit of Krishna without expectation of sense gratification is the highest transcendental quality of work. Even a small beginning of such activity finds no impediment, nor can that small beginning be lost at any stage. Any work begun on the material plane has to be completed, otherwise the whole attempt becomes a failure. But any work begun in Krishna consciousness has a permanent effect, even though not finished. The performer of such work is therefore not at a loss, even if his work in Krishna consciousness is incomplete. So this is a very important verse for those of us who try to share Krishna consciousness with others. Of course, in India, it's pretty much, I would assume, everyone's heard the Maha Mantra at some point in time. Or many people, most people have. Because just hearing the Maha Mantra once from the devotee can protect one. And what's the most, anyone know what the most dangerous type of fear is?
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna, death.
Death, okay. And what about after death? That's the main, biggest fear for a devotee.
Hare Krishna, it is taking birth in the lower life, animals,
Yes.
otherwise hellish
Exactly.
planets. So,
Yeah, so you both got it right. After death, taking an animal birth, because you cannot atato brahma jigyasa, you can't inquire about. You only eat, sleep, mate, and defend, basically. So yes, and so this used to be quite a deep meditation. Prabhupada used to tell us that even if they touch a book, they're benefited. So I remember I would be in the airport distributing books, and so, I tried to sell someone a book, and if they didn't take it, I'd tap them on the head with the book. So they touch the book. Or Prabhupada said, even if they read one word in in his books, people are benefited. So, or take a little prasad. And that's why Prabhupada insisted that everyone who comes to the temple must give some prasadam. So it's quite a meditation that even a little advancement on this path, right? And I always find it sometimes it's quite interesting, kind of the different mindset sometimes in India and in the West. Someone will say something like, maybe not all, maybe you don't think like this, but I've heard people like say, oh no, my mother, yes, she chants, she's not a devotee, she just chants like 4 rounds a day. Here in America, they'll be like, she's definitely a devotee, chanting 4 rounds a day. That's amazing. You know, so especially in my generation, we were very, we thought a lot about this verse, put it that way, that, you know, when we go on or as Haridas Thakur says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that when you're walking in the forest, if you chant loudly, then all the non-moving living entities get benefited. The blades of grass, the trees, the insects, etc. So yeah, I used to think about this a lot. Yeah. Any questions, comments, thoughts on this verse about just a little advancement? Swapam apyasya dharmasya, little dharmasya, trayate, mahato bhayat, the great fear, delivered from the great fear. Okay, now the next verse is one of the, it has a very special meaning for devotees in ISKCON. And it's a very important verse. Vyavasa yatnika buddhir ekeha kurunandana bahu shakka hyanantascha buddhayo vyavasayinam. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many branched. So then Prabhupada writes, a strong faith that by Krishna consciousness one will be elevated to the highest perfection of life is called Vyavasaya Vikabud intelligence. And Prabhupada quotes an important verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Shadha Sabhe Vishwas Kahai Surida Nishchaya Krishna Bhakti Hoilo Sarvakarma Kritahe. And this sentence is one of the most famous sentences in all of Prabhupada's books. Faith means unflinching trust in something sublime. When one is engaged in the duties of Krishna consciousness, he need not act in relation to the material world with obligations to family, traditions, humanity, or nationality. Fruitive activities are the engagement of one's reactions from past good and bad deeds. When one is awake in Krishna consciousness, he need no longer endeavor for good results in his activities. And then Prabhupada explains in the next paragraph, the resolute purpose of a person in Krishna consciousness is based on knowledge. And then the next paragraph is very important. Service in Krishna consciousness is, however, best practice under the able guidance of a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Krishna, who knows the nature of the student and who can guide him to act in Krishna consciousness. As such, to be well-versed in Krishna consciousness, one has to act firmly and obey the representative of Krishna, and one should accept the instruction of the bona fide spiritual master as one's mission in life. So, and then he quotes the last line of the Guru Vastaka. Yasya prasadad bhagavat prasado, yasya prasadan nagati kutopi. So the reason this is such an important verse is that Prabhupada said that in the 1950s, when he read this verse, he read the commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and it made him determined to follow Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's order to preach Krishna consciousness in English. I will read you the translation of that section. This is from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So understand, Prabhupada heard this, what I'm about to read to you, and that's what made him, yes, I have to follow my Guru's order and preach in English and go to the West, okay? of all kinds of, I'll share it screen, I guess, so you can see, you can read along with me. Of all kinds of intelligence, the best is intelligence focused on Bhakti Yoga. In Bhakti Yoga, one's intelligence becomes single-pointed or fixed in determination. One thinks, the instructions of my spiritual master to worship the personality of Godhead by chanting, remembering, serving his feet, and so on are my only sadhana, my only sadhya. Sadhya means goal. My only livelihood. I am incapable of giving up these instructions, either in the stage of practice or in the stage of perfection. They alone are my object of desire and my only responsibility. Besides them, I can desire no other responsibility, not even in my dreams. It is all the same to me whether I feel happy or unhappy, or whether my material existence is eradicated or not. Isn't that powerful? So Prabhupada read that and he was determined. So, so this is not an easy platform to have the Vyavasayatmika Buddhir, Ekha Kurunandana, to be fixed. And it, like we've mentioned many times before, it's harder these days with the mass distractions, weapons of mass distraction, right? And so many distractions in life. But this is Krishna's recommendation. Ekha, one single-minded. Some thoughts on this? Very, very, very important verse.
I have a question actually, going back to Shloka 39.
39.
Yes, because it's connecting to 40 and 41.
Did I skip 39? I skipped 39, didn't I?
No, we talked, I think that's where Krishna uses the words Buddhir Yoge.
No, we didn't talk about it, bro.
I skipped 39. I just realized we didn't talk about 39.
Yes, we didn't speak.
We skipped to 39.
You were all so polite. You didn't tell me. Vraja Vihari, you forgot
I
the
thought you
verse.
covered 39. Okay, so we'll finish 39 and then I will ask my question.
I'm so sorry.
That's it.
It's late at night for me. So this is a transition verse. So Esha te vidhita sankye, Buddhir, there's that word buddhi, yoge twimam shrinu, buddhya yukto, yaya partat, karma bandham pahasyasi. Thus far, I have described the knowledge to you, this knowledge to you through analytical studies. That was verses 11 to 30, okay? Analyzing the difference between the body and the soul. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruit of results. That's Buddha Yoga or Nishkam Karma Yoga. By the way, Buddha Yoga, Nishkam Karma Yoga mean the same thing. But like I said, Prabhupada uses Buddha Yoga more than Nishkam Karma. So that means working without fruit of results. O son of Prita, when you act in such not, when you act in knowledge, you see that? Act in knowledge. You can free yourself from the bondage of works. Because so many times in the Gita, Arjuna is going to say, I want to not act in knowledge. I want to go to the forest, not act, but based on knowledge that you gave me, Krishna. So Prabhupada writes, forgetting his prime duty, he wanted to cease fighting. It's like the third sentence. Because he thought that by not killing his relatives and kinsmen, he would be happier than by enjoying the kingdom after conquering his cousins, the son of Dhritarashtra. In both ways, the basic principles were for sense gratification. Happiness derived from conquering them and happiness derived by seeing kinsmen alive are both the basis of personal sense gratification, even at the sacrifice of wisdom and duty. So now we're going to hear in these, so now it's, in one sense, it's kind of good that we skip, because now the verses that we just studied give you some idea about acting in knowledge. First, Krishna is going to glorify the power of this when he says, in this endeavor, even a little advancement protects you from the most dangerous type of fear, acting in knowledge. And then if you're resolute in purpose, you know, to act in knowledge, you have to be fixed. Okay, now, Mataji, your question.
Yes, Prabhuji, I've always carried this doubt with me. So
Always, like for lifetimes?
So why, or what explanation is there for Prabhupada translating this to Bhakti Yoga? As he purports to 2.40 and 2.41.
You
Actually,
mean-
he introduces Bhakti Yoga in 2.39 itself at a very, it's a lengthy purport. What is
Yes.
the transition? I mean, he is citing also chapter 10, but I've not
You're-
been able to understand this.
You're talking about the purports, not the translations, right?
The purports, yes, because
Yes. yes.
Prabhupada
This-
interchangeably uses Buddhi Yoga and Bhakti Yoga.
Yeah. So one time a disciple said to Prabhupada, one of the scholars says that you put bhakti where bhakti is not to be found. And Prabhupada smiled and he said, that scholar has understood me. Well, but he's not doing anything wrong. What he's doing is giving the conclusion even in chapter 2. So if you only read chapter 2, you'll still understand the goal of life. Even though bhakti doesn't really start, I mean, in full blown in the 7th chapter, right? So Prabhupada gives us the conclusion of Krishna's teachings throughout, so that we don't get confused that anything else other than bhakti is the goal of the Gita. So we are bringing up some nuances for your learning. But I know that helped me. Remember, I didn't have, I'm a kid from New York, no background, never heard of the Bhagavad Gita, never heard of Krishna, never heard of, practically didn't even know India existed practically growing up. I mean, one country of 200 countries, didn't know anything. And so I get Bhagavad Gita, and it's clear to me from practically the first page, what is the goal of life? What is the purpose of living, etc. So Prabhupada very consciously did that. And it's not incorrect, because Buddhi Yoga plus Krishna gives bhakti. So that's why, like I said, when one practices karma yoga or Buddhi yoga in touch with a devotee, then it's bhakti. And by getting one of Prabhupada's books, one is performing bhakti. Is that all right? So he actually said, yeah, that scholar was absolutely right. Not that Krishna is not there. He wasn't saying he wasn't agreeing that Krishna's not there. He's saying that Krishna's conclusion, right? It's kind of like, well, that verse is coming up soon. Okay, anything else? Okay, so verse 42 and 43. Now, this is the first mention of the Vedas. And the Vedas, generally when they're mentioned like this, is the Karma Kanda section, the section that helps you get material enjoyment. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas. Oh yes, if you do this yagya, you'll get such a beautiful bride or whatever. which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, result in good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say there is nothing more than this. So these are persons who are not Vyavasayatmika Buddhir. They're splayed out because they are attracted to the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. So this is the first time we hear the word Vedas, and he's telling Arjuna to give up this Karma Kanda mentality, or the idea of using the Vedas with the aim of pleasing the demigods to gain some temporary fruits and benedictions. So it's a little interesting that in this section, Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to, that in the previous section, Krishna encouraged Arjuna to fight by appealing to the same mentality in Arjuna that he's now condemning. So although previously he was encouraging Arjuna to fight and go to heaven, he's now saying, no, there's a higher level, the level of buddhi, and then bhakti. And then, I didn't read the Sanskrit for that. Yam imam pushpitam bacham pravadant yavi pasyachitaha veda vada rata parta nan yad astiti vadina kamat mana swarga para janma karma phala pradham kritya vishesha bahulam mogaishvaya gatim prati. So these three words are important. Veda vada rata. Veda vada rata. And Prabhupada translates it as supposed followers of the Vedas. Supposed followers of the Vedas. Now the next verse, a famous verse, Bogaishvaya prashaktana taya paritya chetasam vyavisa yatmika buddhi samadhau na vidhyate. No samadhi in the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Lord does not take place. And have you ever had that experience in life that if you're kind of spacing out or involved in some kind of sense gratification, you don't have that fixed determination in bhakti. But if you become regulated, you get up early in the morning every day and you chant your rounds at the same time every day and you offer your food and you get into a kind of a Krishna conscious groove, then you can be much more determined and fixed. So this is, it's an important verse. So that's the problem with and in this context, that's the problem with being attracted to the flowery words of the Vedas without knowing the purpose behind them. You get bewildered and you become splayed out. The word is samadhau na vidhyate, no samadhi. This is the next verse, yeah. So the next verse says, it talks about those Vedas again, Trigunya, Vishaya Veda. Most of the Vedas deal with the three modes of material nature. Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna. Nistrigunya means to rise above. Nirdvanvo Nitya Sattvasto Niryoga Shema Atmavan. The Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the three modes of material nature. There's volumes and volumes and volumes and volumes of Vedic literature on the three modes, none of which Prabhupada translated. O Arjuna, become transcendental to these three modes, Nistrigunya Bhavarjuna. Be free from all dualities, the good and the bad, I like, I don't like, and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. As long as, Prabhupada, the last purport, as long as the material body exists, there are actions and reactions in the material modes. One has to learn tolerance in the face of dualities such as happiness and distress, cold and warmth, and by tolerating such dualities, become free from anxieties regarding gain and safety. The transcendental position is achieved in full Krishna consciousness when one is fully dependent on the goodwill of Krishna. So that's, you see that? This transcendental position is achieved in full Krishna consciousness when one is fully dependent on the goodwill of Krishna. So let's see.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I have a question. In this shloka as well, Krishna now, talking about established in the self. But can we say that Nishkama Karma Yogi is actually focused on self-realization?
Well, yeah, they know that they're not their body, and they know that they're the soul. They may not know that they're Krishna's servant. It depends if they come in contact with a devotee or not.
Okay.
But they're detached. They're doing their duty dutifully. And in the Varna Ashram system, there's quite likely that they have some spiritual practice as well, traditionally. But they can get really waylaid by the Vedas that tell them how to enjoy in this world. Right? It can be quite distracting.
Right. So these verses are connected to the verse where Krishna has said, resolute, and then those who are not, many branched.
Yes.
That many branches is what Krishna is expanding on right now.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this cold and warmth. I guess I shouldn't admit this, but I do sometimes. Click around on YouTube. So I went to this YouTube channel where this doctor was talking about the benefits of cold showers. And so recently I started, he says you can start with 30 seconds and you try to build up to 5 minutes and all the various health benefits. And it's an opportunity. I found it as like a good opportunity because, here in the Western world, especially when you probably wouldn't have this unless, I guess where you all live, water's never really like freezing cold, I would guess, because but here, woo, it's like almost like ice coming out. Or Prabhupada took a bath in Allahabad during Kumbh Mela, very, very cold, 1977 and 71. He was at Kumbh Mela. I don't know if anyone spent time in UP in the winter. It's very, very cold in the fog and no sun and he was there taking his loda and taking bath like that. So maybe hot and cold water, maybe you won't have that opportunity, but there's other ways to work on trying to become even-minded in the face of dualities. That's the basic lesson there. Okay, now Krishna concludes his arguments in the next verse, 46. Yavan arta udapane sarvatra samplutodake tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vichanataha. All purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. So, traditionally, at least in India, there was, in the villages, there was a well for specific purpose, one for drinking water, one for washing clothes, one for cleaning utensils, or for taking bath. But all those activities can be done simultaneously on the shore of a lake or a river. Right? If there's a source of fresh water, we don't have to go to, especially if they're fresh water, you don't have to go to the well to fulfill your purpose. So similarly, one who is Vijanataha, in complete knowledge of the Vedic purpose, need only, so this is the context, need only perform Buddhi Yoga for Krishna's pleasure. So the performance of Buddhi Yoga or Bhakti satisfies the purpose behind the Vedas. And then the Karma Kanda rituals, they become unnecessary. Yeah. And I think I wanted to read something from the purport there. Prabhupada writes in the second paragraph, so one must be intelligent enough to understand the purpose of the Vedas without being attached to the rituals only, and must not desire to be elevated to the heavenly planets for a better quality of sense gratification. It is not possible for the common man in this age to follow all the rules and regulations of Vedic rituals, nor is it possible to study all of the Vedanta and the Upanishads thoroughly. It requires much time, energy, knowledge, and resources to execute the purpose of the Vedas. This is hardly possible in this age. The best purpose of Vedic culture is served, however, by chanting the holy name of the Lord as recommended by Lord Chaitanya, the deliverer of all fallen souls. So that's, yeah. You know, we do our little yagyas in ISKCON when somebody's getting married or for initiation, and we, and we may do a little of this, a little of that, but really our focus is the chanting of the holy names. So even when Prabhupada did that whole elaborate installation of Krishna Balaram in Vrindavan, he said later that the real installation was that devotees were doing kirtan. He did all the elaborate stuff to satisfy the local Goswamis, and they wouldn't have thought the deities were installed otherwise. But he said just that the chanting was going on, that was the important thing. And I remember many years ago when my son had his grain ceremony in Vrindavan, and we had a kirtan going on while Vraja Prabhu had my son on his lap, and he was trying to pick, in Vrindavan, they usually they have the book, the money, and then they have Braja Raj, like like a ball made of mud from Vrindavan. And it's funny, in those days, everyone really wanted their child to choose the book. I think now some of them would rather them go for the money. But anyway, the point was that Vraja Prabhu at the end said, yeah, we did this little thing, we gave him some sweet rice and stuff, but the real thing was that kirtan was going on. So if you want to make anything auspicious, you have kirtan. Yeah. So when my mother, she passed away in Vrindavan, and so even the funeral procession was auspicious because we were chanting all the way to the Yamuna River. Yeah. So any questions or comments on this verse? Okay, now we come to perhaps, at least in UP, where I was in Vrindavan, one of the most famous verses in the Gita. And it's funny because people quote the first line, but they don't like the second line. Karma nevari karaste. You may have heard so many people can quote that. Karma nevari karaste. I don't need God. I'm just doing my duty. Bas. Right? I don't know if you hear that in South India so much. North India, so many people say, no. Krishna says karma nevari karaste. But nobody quotes mafaleshu kadachana. That you should not be attached to the fruits. So, karma nevari karaste mafaleshu kadachana mam karma falo hetu bur mam taisangas karmani. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Prabhupada writes, There are three considerations here: prescribed duties, so that's doing the right things; capricious duties, which means capricious work, which means doing whimsical things; and then inaction means doing nothing. Prescribed duties are activities enjoined in terms of one's acquired modes of material nature. So based on our body, being a Kshatriya, Brahmin, etc. Capricious work means action without the sanction of authority. And inaction means not performing one's prescribed duties. And at the last paragraph, it says, Arjuna was therefore advised by the Lord to fight as a matter of duty. So just do it because it's your duty without attachment to the results. His non-participation in the battle is another side of attachment. Such attachment never leads one to the path of salvation. Any attachment, positive or negative, is cause for bondage, and inaction is sinful. Therefore, fighting as a matter of duty was the only auspicious path of salvation for Arjuna. So this is a really important verse in which Krishna is telling Arjuna to perform Nishkam Karma Yoga. Right? And it's very interesting. He's saying that Arjuna, your adhikar, karman evadikar, your adhikar, your eligibility is to do karma. But while working, you should work in the right way. So this idea of, I can just say, this concept of just doing one's duty, and that's the reward, just doing your duty. That's becoming, so much more foreign in the world today. I remember when I first moved to India was the 80s. And I used to like really spending time with older people, and a lot of them had been through partition, right? At that time, if they're probably not alive now, but 40 years later, but and I saw, and I know it's still there today, and maybe in South India more people are more pious, but most of my time was in North India, and you would see people that would just like, this is my duty, I am doing my duty. They might not have been great devotees, but they did their, they did their work, they did their prescribed duty, just because it was meant to be done. It was very interesting when I would talk to people like that. But I see that it seems to be less and less now than it was 40 years ago when I was first. Gosh, it's been 40 years, first time I went to India. More than 40 years. So that's, and of course, as Navadvip Mataji kept saying, then you add Krishna to this and you do your duty for his pleasure.
So for the Nishkama Karma Yogi, work itself is worship.
Yes.
And work.
Well, I don't know if they think of worship. No, I would be a little careful about that, because some people use that phrase that you just said to avoid God. It's basically they're saying, I don't need God.
No, but is a Nishkama Karma Yogi acknowledging, to a certain extent they acknowledge God, but they don't seem to have a relationship beyond that acknowledgement.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I do know this, that they do their duty because it's meant to be done. It's the right thing to do. I guess their relationship with God, I can't say what that is. But sometimes people say, I'm doing my duty. I don't, what did you say? What was the
worship?
Work is, yeah, worship, work is worship. That they almost say that they atheists say that sometimes.
True.
Yeah.
I
So Nishkam Karma Yogi will generally not be an atheist. They just may not have come in contact with a devotee yet to get that bhakti. Yeah. Yeah. Other questions, comments?
Really?
Okay.
In India,
Yep.
there
Yes,
are
Guru.
many people who are born in Brahmana family. Brahmana not necessarily means initiated, otherwise also. The prescribed duty for a Brahmana is to do morning Sandhyavandan, for example. Now, by taking up Krishna consciousness and reading Bhagavad Gita, is it? But okay, just because we are in devotional service, we are chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra, all those things, should we not give up that during that Sandhyavandan, which is a prescribed duty as per our scriptures, or do only chanting is sufficient?
Well, we should follow scripture, no doubt. But the question is which one? So like we saw, if you remember in the first chapter, Arjuna was presenting things according to Dharma Shastra. Krishna was, wait, am I getting this right? There was Artha Shastra, there's Dharma Shastra, and there's Bhakti Shastra. So there's a beautiful verse. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Krishna, give me a second. No, that's not it. Let's see. It's in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And let me try one other thing here. That may have done it. Krishna, Krishna. Anyway, it said, oh wait, I'm going to give you one more try. I know somewhere else to find it. Are you all familiar with Vanipedia? Vanipedia.com. It is one of the most amazing webs. Oh, .org. It is incredible. It's been like a 20-year project to put together any instructions that Prabhupada has given on just about anything. It's very, you can just research anything. It's a little slow, that it's not as fast as some other websites, but it is fantastic. Yeah. So now let me see if I have found my. Anyway, I won't find it right now. But the verse says that we are born in debt to our parents, to the demigods, to the great sages, etc. It begins Devarshi Bhutatma, and I can't remember the rest of the verse.
Canto 11, Prabhu, yeah.
Yeah, Canto 11.
Yeah.
And it says that, but if one becomes a devotee of Krishna, then all those debts are paid. Otherwise, one has natural debts, right? So that's the idea, that when we become, it's kind of like that last verse we just said, right? That you may be a Brahmin, you may be a Kshatriya by birth, this and that. And that's kind of like the different wells. But if you go to the river or to the lake, then all of your needs are satisfied. So, oh, there we go. Thank you very much. 11:5:41. 11:5:41.
Karabhajana Muni to King Nimi, I think.
Yes. Okay, anyone who has taken, I'll just share my screen so you can see it. Thank you for that research, Prabhu. Anyone who has taken shelter at the lotus feet of Mukunda, the giver of liberation, giving up all kinds of obligation, and has taken to the path in all seriousness, owes neither duties nor obligations to the demigods, sages, general living entities, family members, humankind, or forefathers. So, as far as, different Brahminical activities that you mentioned, I'm not so familiar with all of them, but we can anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam, accept things that you feel are favorable to bhakti and reject things that you feel are unfavorable to bhakti. So, I don't know specifically the details that you're talking about, but whether they help you in your bhakti, then they can be accepted. And if they don't, then they can be rejected. I should have said that 10 minutes ago, right? Okay, shall we carry on?
Yes, bro.
All right, I got to go back to my Bhagavad Gita. We're on what verse now? 48.
48.
48. Okay. Yoga sta kuru karmani sanga tyavat tvaktva dhananjaya siddhi asiddho samobhutva samatvam yoga uchate. Perform your duty equipoised, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. And then this next verse is a beautiful verse. Durena, Dura, keep far away. Durena hyavaram karma, buddhi yoga dhananjaya, buddho sharanam anvichcha, kripana phalahitava. O Dhananjaya, keep all abominable activities far distant by bhakti, by devotional service. So there's your example. Prabhupada translates buddhi yoga as strength in Krishna consciousness. So that's an example there. People will say, wait, no, it says buddhi yoga, it doesn't say bhakti yoga. And in that consciousness, surrender unto the Lord. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. So what fruits, wait, 40, that was 49. So what fruits does one attain when we try to enjoy the fruits of our work, the results of our work? It's the fruits of birth and death. So Krishna is criticizing fruit of desires and glorifying buddhi yoga, or as Prabhupada translates it, as devotional service. We should work hard to escape suffering, and we should not become more entangled in it. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to quote from the purport. No. So 50. Buddhi yukto jahatiha ube sukrita duskrite tasmat yoghaya yujyasva yoga karma sukoshalam. This is beautiful. Yoga karma sukoshalam, the art of work. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad reactions, even in this life. Therefore, strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. So again, buddhi yukto, Prabhupada translates as engaged in devotional service. Purport. Since time immemorial, each living entity has accumulated the various reactions of his good and bad work. As such, he is continuously ignorant of his real constitutional position. One's ignorance can be removed by the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita, which teaches one to surrender unto Lord Krishna in all respects and become liberated from the chained victimization of action, reaction, birth, and death. So the art of work is to act in such a way that we become free from good and bad reactions. remember Arjuna, he was afraid of sinful reactions for killing his kinsman, but dutiful, detached work and knowledge protects him from ever getting sinful reactions. Okay. Now, 1 second. I just want to check one thing. Okay. Any questions or comments on these? Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm still confused. So if you don't mind, I want to clarify a question again. So since the theme still is very much Nishkama Karma Yogi here, from Krishna's perspective, what is the destination for a Nishkama Karma Yogi? Is that birth and death again? If they are performing, essentially Krishna is talking about a karma here. But if you're performing a karma, do you have to take birth again? Since you're not a devotee of Krishna yet.
Yeah, you may go to the heavenly planets.
Okay.
You may even go to the higher than the heavenly. You see, above the heavenly planets are the planets of the great sages.
Yes.
But you still have to come down. Shinye punye martya loka vishante. When you use up your good karma, you come down again. Only by love, only by bhakti can you get out of this mess.
Okay. So the rishis are not considered jnanis.
Depends on which rishi.
Huh?
Narada Rishi is a devotee. Depends on the rishi.
Depends on the rishi. Okay.
Yeah. Not all rishis are, it's not one rishi fits all, one size fits all.
Okay. Okay, I think that clarifies it for me. I was always confused. What's the destination for a Nishkama Karma Yogi?
Yeah, they go up, but then it's a roller coaster ride.
Yes.
They come down again after they. Actually, one definition, just some more details. One definition of the word karma is the process of returning back to earth from the heavenly planets. Yeah, that's one definition. Obviously, karma also means as you sow, so shall you reap. All that. Being thus engaged in devotional service to the Lord, great sages or devotees free themselves from the results of work in the material world. In this way, they become, so this is your question, right? This way, they become freed from the cycle of birth and death and attain the state beyond all miseries by going back to Godhead. Karma jam buddhi yukta hi phalam tvaktva manishina janma bhanda vinirmukta padam gachant yanamayam. Prabhupada writes in the second paragraph, owing to ignorance, one does not know that this material world is a miserable place where there are dangers at every step. Out of ignorance, only less intelligent persons try to adjust to this situation by fruitive activities, thinking that the resultant actions will make them happy, but they don't. In the last sentence, service for the cause of the Lord is called karma yoga or buddhi yoga, or in plain words, devotional service to the Lord. So there you get a clear indication of what Prabhupada is saying here. So I'll just read one thing from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments on this verse, and he says that detached work leads to realized knowledge of the soul. Okay, and when one thus becomes self-realized, he can gradually become blessed with knowledge of the Lord and surrender to him. Such surrender frees him from the material world, and after liberation, he becomes eligible to attain Vaikuntha. So I hope what I just read helps you, Navadip Mataji, because
sorry, Prabhu, can you just repeat the last sentence again from what you just read?
Yeah, I'll read the whole thing again because it's short. When one thus becomes self-real, so we know this, acting in knowledge in a detached way actually gives a realization of the soul. And when one thus becomes self-realized, that he can gradually become blessed with knowledge of the Lord, come and talk with the devotee, and can surrender to him. Such surrender frees them from the material world. And after liberation, he becomes eligible to attain Vaikuntha. So it's more of an explanation of this verse that's saying it, it's not, there's a path towards going back to Godhead. Does that help?
Yes, so that means detachment precedes understanding of self.
Acting in knowledge, we're going to hear this again and again in the Gita, acting in knowledge, acting the knowledge that I'm not my body, but acting in that knowledge is better than inaction. Okay. So we'll do two more verses. Yadate moha kalilam budhir vyatir vati tarishyati tada gantasi nirvedam shotavyasya shutasya. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, that's the Vedas, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard about the Veda, not hearing from a devotee. Obviously, it's not what is meant here. Prabhupada writes in the beginning, there are many good examples in the lives of great devotees of the Lord. Oh, this also answers Prabhuji's question a few minutes ago, of those who became indifferent to the rituals of the Vedas simply by devotional service. When a person factually understands Krishna and his relationship with Krishna, he naturally becomes completely indifferent to the rituals of fruitive activities, which would include, and he says here, even though an experienced Brahmana. So that's a perfect answer to your question, Prabhu. He says it right there. And then he quotes Madhavendra Puri, who says, oh, my prayers 3 times a day, all glory to you, which is a Brahminical thing. Oh, bathing, another Brahminical thing. I offer my obeisances to you. Oh, demigods, oh, forefathers, please excuse me for my inability to offer you my respects. Now, wherever I sit, I can remember the great descendant of the Yadu dynasty, Krishna, the enemy of Kamsa, and thereby I can free myself from all sinful bondage. I think this is sufficient for me. So it's Krishna's being quite clear here again and again. The example of the lake or the river and the wells, and then hear what he's saying. And finally, for this week, Shruti vipatipana panate yada stasyati nischala samad va achala buddhis tada yogam avapsyasi. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. Purport: to say that one is in samadhi is to say that one has fully realized Krishna consciousness. That is, one is in full samadhi, has realized Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So Arjuna has to transcend these fruitive desires to become fixed in Buddha yoga. So the desires to perform these Vedic duties, this sacrifice, that ritual, they no longer should disturb the person who's trying to make spiritual progress. And Prabhupada again answers the question that was asked before, because if we neglect the Vedic processes, are we in trouble? And Prabhupada writes, in Krishna consciousness, one comes directly into communion with Krishna. And thus all directions from Krishna may be understood in that transcendental state. One is sure to achieve results by such activities and attain conclusive knowledge. One has only to carry out the orders of Krishna or his representative, the spiritual master. Okay, so finally, Krishna has for the time being finished describing Buddha yoga. And now from verse 54, he's going to talk about the divine consciousness and how to attain it. So for the homework for next week, finish the chapter. Okay, up to chapter 70, verse 72. Okay. I want to take rest because tomorrow's Nishkama Chaturdasi and it's already almost 10 o'clock.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Danvat Pranam. Just
Yes.
to read, Hare Bol Mama. Just to read the like 72 verse or any slokas to memorize.
I'll have to check. I don't think there's any slokas. No, there's not slokas from here until 72.
No worries, Prabhu. Thank you so much. I had some questions, but my daughter is with me. She was just making noise, so I was not able to.
So, Bagme.
Haan, baad mein.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.